There we go. Anybody have any insights from doing that? Like in terms of where you are in the process, in terms of like policy deployment or monthly reviews? I'm in Vendra.
Everyone. Yep.
So we're just opening up with any discussion from your homework assignment in after last week's session. Any insights, any questions, anything you wanted to share with anyone else?
We had a meeting with management. I showed them the financial work improvement exercise and all that. And we are working on defining different product line as a value stream and try to use that one and to see like how every value stream is working.
Yeah.
And try to put action like what value stream need more focus. So that's what
Okay.
the
All
update.
right, good. All right, we can get started with today's presentation. I wanted to also just ask, are there any specific topics or questions that you may have that you would like to get answered today during this session? Obviously, we can do follow-up, but I just wanted to throw that out there. Is there anything on your mind so I can work it in?
I was more looking into like right now we have tools to how to measure the value stream and all that. But I just wanted to see like how it will connect from top to the bottom level. Like what kind of KPIs we can put in between on the operator level, the manager level, and the management.
Talking about the performance measures?
Performance measures.
Okay.
And how can we manage it, and what kind of different meetings and countermeasures and all. How that structure will flow.
All right. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that. I have a wrap-up summary of all the different practices. We can talk a little bit about it there. All right.
Nick, one just point of very quick benchmarking. I'm very curious, having just finished the video and listening to last week's because I missed, but of the companies you talked to, how many organizations are kind of where you would want to aspire to be as far as the budgeting process being more of like a rolling forecast exercise and not measuring actual versus plan, and some of the things you talked about in that segment in terms of, highest level of detail? Because I know for us, when I look at grading our organization on that section specifically, we're probably at the farthest end of the spectrum on the other side based on the process that I've seen and been involved in.
Well, yeah, the companies I've worked with are, I would say more of them are in a current traditional state than they've made progress on it. It's one of those, the interesting thing about budgeting, I may have said this last week, nobody likes it at all, but everybody just does it the same way. They do it the same way every year, even though they don't like it. And even though some of the things that we talked about last week, inherently, they know that, but yet they keep doing it. It's almost like that definition of madness.
It seems like a huge opportunity. I've been part of work teams where you might do, 20 some odd iterations of the plan, and even go through the disgrace of going through a bottoms up exercise only to be told that, well, you're nowhere close. And then the tops down metrics come requiring, many versions of and iterations of rework.
Yeah. Mike, did you want to add anything? Because you've worked with some companies on budgeting.
Right. So in my company where I led financial planning and analysis, we actually completely did a lean transformation of the financial planning process. And we got rid of the static 12-month budgeting process and replaced it with forecasting and other control tools. So that's something that we could get into at another point more deeply. But then since I left my company, I've coached, I don't know, a half dozen other organizations on the same transformation, mostly in healthcare, because that's been my focus for financial planning transformation. But I know that there are good case studies in other companies, in other industries, whether it's financial services. American Express is a good case example. Southwest Airlines has done quite a bit of transformation of its financial planning processes. There's quite a bit of exemplars in banking internationally, and then also in petrochemical industry. So there are a lot of exemplars out there across different industries. And like I said, I've implemented it myself.
Yeah, I even, I did a little bit of that too as CFO, because I personally got tired of the gamesmanship. And so I mean, again, I didn't work in a company the size of GE or anything like that, but I basically worked with the president and vice president, and we sort of set high-level financial targets. Sales, maybe a return on, say, overall profit before tax percentage. And then we figured, okay, how much can expenses go up, to meet that? And what we did is we would send out the departmental budgets, and we would get everybody together and talk about it. We were not a large company, but we basically would say, look, at the company level, I'm just making up numbers. We're projecting an overall like 5% increase in expenses over your current projected for this year. If you can live with that, don't worry about the line items. Just worry about the bottom line number. If you can live with that, you're done. And just about every manager came back and said, yeah, we can live with that. Then and if you wanted more than 5%, that's what you had to justify. But again, it was just a macro total. We got rid of the line item by month, because it just, like you were talking about the iterations and the back and forth and all that stuff. So what we did is we gave the targets at the beginning, so that the people that have to come up with the details, they knew what the sort of the boundaries were, and it seemed to work well. It's I think the other thing is what you mentioned, Mike. If you use budgeting, if you use actual to budget as any performance indicator, whether a manager is held accountable for explaining it, whether it's part of a manager's annual review, if you're using it for that, my opinion is that creates a lot of the gamesmanship in the process, because I'm going to do whatever I can in the budget to make sure that I stay underneath, even trying to, put in factors for the unexpected. And then that conflicts with the goals of management, which they already have those mental numbers. They have the numbers in their head that they want to hit. And it's really,
and it risks conflicting with the lean strategy. So
Yeah.
we completely changed our performance incentives and our executive bonus alignment to continuous improvement and meeting our end of process, end of pipe margin requirements, and not a specific individual department number. So I think your point is really important.
Yeah. And it's just, I think I think it's one of the best opportunities to identify waste and make changes. Because it doesn't just impact finance and accounting, it impacts every manager who has to prepare a budget. And it's something they don't like to do. So, you know, you don't have to sell them on this idea of improving it, you know, and changing it. The one drawback of budgeting is, especially if you do it annually, is you can't, you only do it once a year. So it's not like you can experiment with it every month and make gradual improvements. You almost have to plan the improvements up front and then put them in, you know, use them.
Appreciate your perspectives. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, can you not just swap it around and say, well, you have to do a lot of companies also have implemented latest estimates. And if you just do your latest estimates really well, you just promote one of them to your budget, and that's the end of it. So
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
don't go and start fighting with senior leadership about how you call it. Just be in charge of your own P&L and promote one of those to budget. And another point I would like to make, it can also be helpful to have one of the latest estimate promoted to budget, because that gives a reference. Not that you have to meet the budget, but it gives a reference, and it gives you also a good a point to reassess all your rules of thumb, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
How much does a direct employee really cost, and make those type of calculations. So, and if you do that once a year really thoroughly, that can also help you in addressing the other KPIs. So I'm a little bit in between. I understand the latest estimate, and I like the rolling 12-month forecast, and also looking a bit further beyond that, even 6 or 12 years, just as a mindset. But promoting one of the latest estimate to a budget also as a point of reference, I don't think that is too bad of an idea. Just don't make it the holy grail of numbers.
Yeah, good points. Yeah, there's that old saying in the lean world, don't let best get in the way of better. So anything you can do to make the budgeting process better from a lean viewpoint is good. You know, you don't have to, it doesn't have to be best, but just make it better.
Yeah.
All right. All right, so let me share my screen and we will move on. Oh, by the way, I'll just bring this up now. I forwarded you a series of hand-drawn diagrams that my retired colleague Brian Maskell created. That I actually reference these sometimes because there's a whole lot of information on here, but it really follows, a lot of these diagrams follow what we've been talking about the past month. So I just wanted to share them with you as documents for referral. You know, if you want to reference them, I thought he did a lot of creative things, I guess, in his spare time in hotel rooms while he was traveling. this was some of them. So anyway, feel free to use them if you want. All right, so now let's get into the presentation.
Nick,
Yes.
can you send us that one also, the cell one, in progress checking board? I think I didn't receive that.
Which one? I couldn't understand.
The one you just showed, the e-progress tracking board.
Do you want to see it again?
No, can you send that also?
Oh yeah, I'll send it. I thought I sent that one.
Thank you.
I'll send that out after this. Okay, so managing the value stream. You know, one thing that's one difficulty with a lean transformation is that you have to do it while you're running the business. And, you know, you can't, I mean, it'd be easy to, if you could shut the business down for a little while and make all the changes and open the business back up. And so there's always this inertia, because we're trying to run the business, there's always this inertia to go back, you know, to sort of, let's do what we've been doing, because it may not, you know, maybe it's, the process has a lot of waste in it, but at least it works and we know it works, as opposed to experimenting and trying new ways. And, you know, that sort of thinking, it can be involved in many parts of the organization, not just in, you know, operational processes. So really, I think one of the keys to success in any sort of lean transformation is the managers in the business and how they manage. Because ultimately, you know, if you're looking at a department with a manager, you know, there's a close working relationship, and the way how the manager manages, even on a daily basis, is going to go a long way towards sustaining improvements. And whether it's a large company or a small company. So what we're going to do today is we're going to sort of talk about a lot of these issues. Some may call it sort of more cultural issues. So about how to sustain things. So first, we're going to talk about creating a value stream organization, which in my opinion sounds simpler than it is, only because of company structure. We're going to talk about manager standard work. It's also called leader standard work. You know, how to transition from managing to coaching, which sort of fits into manager standard work. We're going to talk a little bit about decision making, which is a management practice, how decisions are made and analyzed. We're not going to get into a lot of details, but a lot of what is applicable to manager standard work and coaching also, excuse me, can be applied into decision making. Then we'll do a little bit of I have a little bit of a wrap up, and we'll summarize the course. A lot of what we talked about in sessions 1, 2, and 3 are more sort of operational type issues. You know, how do we do daily lean management? How do we manage improvement? You know, what are the types of improvement activities and policy deployment? You know, and today it's all about the management behaviors that really create the system. I mean, you can put in daily lean management. You can put in a policy deployment process, but if the behaviors and the actions of managers don't sort of adapt to the new way to operate, the system's not going to work. Okay, and so you need both to work together to make things happen. All right, value stream organization. So as I mentioned, this is a contentious type issue. At least I've seen it in companies. The main reason I think is because, you know, most companies are not structured around value streams. There's your vertical organizational structure, your functional silos. And that's the way the company's managed. And you have managers in all these positions who have a lot of influence, they have a lot of responsibility of running, running a department or running part of the company. And so, you got this like vertical thinking, and it's well established. Now we want to start thinking differently, and we need to focus on value streams. So I talked about this in the beginning of the first session. What's the definition of a value stream? And it's not, the definition's right there. What's important here, though, I think, is to, and this is more of a reminder from session 1, the people in the organization need to understand that the primary purpose of value streams is to be able to serve customers better. And, you're all very familiar with value streams being horizontal and not vertical, and that they flow through departments. And, how do you coordinate those actions at the proper time to create the value? And people, the employees in the company, if you have value streams in place, or you're in the process of getting them in place in terms of identifying them, there needs to be clarity in what the value streams are, why you are moving to a value stream organization, and what's the benefit. Okay, it gets into, especially lower in the organization, when the tendency is for people, who do I look to maybe in my daily work? Who's my daily manager? Who do I go to when I have a problem or an issue? Okay, so that needs to be very, very clear. So let me just ask, where do you stand on identifying value streams? I may have asked you this in the first course or first session. I am sorry, but I forgot. Anybody want to share? All right. So it's important to create what I like to call the value stream organization. We can identify the value streams. We know what they are, but how are we going to organize our people and our resources and our management practices around those value streams? One way to do it is to actually make organizational changes. Okay, you can change the structure of the company, change reporting relationships. This is typically difficult to do at the beginning, but it's possible. I've only worked over the years, I've only worked with one company that was early in the lean transformation that actually made physical changes. Now, it was a smaller company, so they basically said, well, we're going to have to do this anyway. Let's just do it, get it over with. What I would say, my personal recommended approach is to create strong self-directed teams around the value streams. These teams have responsibility, they have authority, and there's some dotted line relationship to reporting to different functions. It's much easier to put a team together and in terms of being able to manage rather than going through, the organizational restructure, which, in lots of companies requires this retreat to some out of the way place where management can figure it all out. So let's talk about self-directed work teams. And the first place I want to start is sort of like at the cell or the process level, okay? And there's 4 characteristics of a self-directed work team. First is ownership. They have day-to-day operational management responsibilities. They're in charge of figuring out what to get done and how to get it done. There's a lot of accountability. Okay, they have to meet certain operational standards. They're responsible for basic problem solving, doing root cause analysis, and maybe even some, simple daily improvements. And what are the practices? A lot of what we've talked about, especially in daily lean management. So, the team is responsible for daily lean management. So I guess my question is right now to you, whether it's looking at a finance team at GE, or whether it's looking at in your other companies, do you sort of have a good, do you have self-directed work teams in place, or is it more sort of the traditional, we have a team of people, but we have some level of a supervisor or a team lead that tells everybody what to do? So where do you stand on this?
Say for us in finance, most of the time we see the traditional reporting structure. There's probably pockets of this that exist, but they're the exception.
Okay.
Well, I'm based in the Netherlands, and as you probably know, the Dutch always have an opinion. So
Yes.
by nature, we are a little more self-directing than most, I must say. But we are looking to get even to get that because if you have a boss, it's also easy to stay within your comfort zone, because you just listen to what your boss is saying and then you just follow. Now we are trying to motivate people to voice their ideas and to think beyond this budget, but think a little bit further and but not just think, also make it into plans and follow up on those plans. So that's where we are now.
Okay, good. Anybody else?
Also, we have a traditional reporting system. So my question is, like, for example, you said the self-directed work team. So that means like the team will have like one team for each value stream or something like that.
Yeah, well, yeah, we're going to talk about value stream teams here in a second. Right now, I was looking more at sort of like the work cells. If you're really manufacturing, what are the work cells, and you have self-directed work teams, or for example, in like finance, how is accounts payable structured? So that's what I was talking about right now. But we are going to move the same principles apply to a value stream team. It's just there's a wider span of control than the cell. One of the reasons I'm talking about self-directed work teams first is because you're going to see, when we start talking about manager standard work, and when we talk about transitioning from managing into coaching, we need we need the traditional role of the manager, the sort of like the command and control or telling people what to do. That sort of needs to go away so they have time to do what we really want them to do, which is spend more time coaching and focusing on improvement rather than getting involved in the day-to-day details. But these day-to-day details, somebody needs to manage them. And who is that going to be? So that's the idea. Get the self-directed work teams in place, because then that relieves a lot of the burden on managers and allows you then to transition them into new roles with some new responsibilities. All right, so let's move a step up and let's talk about the value stream organization. And look, current state, you have your departmental organizational structure. That basically really isn't suitable for value stream requirements. So, what do you want? What's the purpose of having some value stream organization? One, you want to optimize the performance of the entire value stream. So, yeah, you can say that somebody high up in the hierarchy of the organization really has span of control over a value stream, but they're too far removed from the operational issues to understand how to optimize performance. We want to serve customers better. We want to improve. And most importantly, there needs to be clear reporting relationships. So what are your options? It's pretty much create some level of a matrix organization. Now, yes, you can try to create true value streams and eliminate the departments. Like I said a few minutes ago, that's very, very difficult to do. So start with some level of a matrix. Okay. So is the department matrix to the value stream, or is the value stream matrix to the department? Does the value stream have specialist subject matter expert coaches? For example, if you were in manufacturing, you have a value stream team that's focused on operational issues. You might have a quality subject matter expert or an engineering subject matter expert that you can call on. So you have to make this really, really clear. And I'm going to, what's best? It's hard to say. It really depends on your organization. And you really have to think about, the daily activities in the value stream. What needs to go on and what kind of response times do we need, especially from any kind of subject matter expert or specialist? And as you can see, this matrix organization doesn't necessarily blow up your existing org chart. I once heard Jim Womack speak at a Lean conference, and he was talking about value streams. And he said, and it's always interesting to hear people like him talk about, very detailed topics, because he doesn't get into the weeds too much. He said, you have to create a value stream. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. You have to create a value stream organization so that people know where to look. Meaning, if they're having a problem or an issue, or for daily management, and he said it like this. He said, do I look this way horizontally, or do I look up the organization? Which way do I look? And that needs to be crystal clear to everybody in the organization. I did this work for, well, I do periodic work for a company in Alabama that's a fast-growing business, and they were talking about identifying value streams and moving to a value stream organization, and they built this elaborate structure, and they were reviewing it with me. And they even had names of people in positions like value stream managers and the teams underneath it. And I finally said something similar to what Jim Womack said is, okay, but those people in that, and I mentioned some group, I said, do they know who they're reporting, do they understand their reporting relationships, or do they understand the communication relationships? And they hadn't really thought that through. And actually, they never got around to it. But it's one of those things. So even if you create a value stream team, what responsibilities does it have? A value stream management team should be cross-functional in nature. Okay, think of, it's almost like a senior leadership team for a value stream. What functions need to be represented such that the value stream can be considered something like an independent business unit that really has two overarching responsibilities. One is serve customers better, and how do we eliminate waste and optimize the flow through the value stream? So who needs to be on that team? You can have part-time team members, okay? Again, it's like in one of the best examples, like in a manufacturing value stream, you see a value stream manager has an operational focus, might be, and they're the value stream manager. And then, if I'm working with the company, I said, well, how is sales going to be represented? Who's going to be there? And they don't think it through because they think that, the value stream is just really about operations. It doesn't take into account, for example, sales. Or another good example is accounting and finance. How are you going to represent them on the team? That doesn't mean that you need a full-time finance person on the team, on the value stream team, but you have responsibilities. You could have finance people that are representative on more than one value stream team, and they attend the meetings and they have some responsibilities there. Any of you have value stream teams in place?
Nick, like Michael Scarpa had mentioned, we don't have it consistently across GE, but we have it in pockets.
Okay.
And so one that really comes to mind is we formed something called mission-based teams. And this will be a true cross-functional team that is that is empowered to go and solve a problem. So we had a mission-based team, for example, that worked for a couple of years on cost out. And that would have people from operations, from product lines, engineering, finance, etc. And we have seen a lot of success with those mission-based teams.
Yeah.
But again, they're very much in pockets and they're very effective. And it also reminds me of the kind of teams we pull together when we have to solve a big problem. So, when we're launching a big PSR on on-time delivery or cash linearity, then this is kind of the thinking, that we pull together.
Yeah. Oh, great. Great. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. I mean, a company like GE is huge, and it's really hard to do this, but you guys get it, which is really what's important. Anybody else want to share anything about the idea of value stream teams? Even if you don't have them, I mean, do you think that they might be effective in your business?
We don't have anything like that per se. It would definitely be effective. We have I'd say a manager load leveling problem, I guess, where the managers are putting out fires now more than they should be. And so developing teams like that, a cross-functional team, we have one for, trying to reduce waste, but it's wound up being more people are, either can't make the meeting. And so it's a priority, but it's not a priority. So getting the culture to really understand, hey, we really need this, and here's the benefits of this, something we definitely need to work on.
Yeah. Okay. It's interesting. You mentioned the one thing that managers spend a whole lot of time on is, sort of fighting fires and trying to put them out, and they get so busy with that. It's and they say they're too, that, oh, we're too busy because we're fighting fires, but putting new systems in place to, one, prevent fires from occurring, and number two, to systematically address how fires are dealt with. And again, teams can do the firefighting. If you give them, they might need some capabilities and some training, but for the most part, if, the people that do the work probably have a good idea on how to solve the problems that are showing up as fires. The other aspect which you mentioned, and I just wanted to comment on, was sort of the priority, that you said something about having meetings to do this, but then people don't show up to meetings because you have other priorities. And again, it's part of value stream management is making sure that managers understand what their priorities are. And there is a shift in what the priorities are, and it needs to be baked into the way the business is run. But and I mean, maybe I don't know if your company's like this or not, but if you have I've been in some companies where managers just run from meeting to meeting all day. The meeting goes for 1 hour, and the next meeting begins at the top of the next hour, and you're just moving rooms, for example, and you barely have time to catch your breath. You take your laptop in there so you can catch up on email while the meeting's going on, which means you can't dedicate your full mental capacity to the meeting. And so nothing is very, very effective. And, like I said, and this is key, is that these managers are vital to sustaining lean thinking, to sustaining all these systems that we've been talking about in these courses. It is those mid-level managers that are going to make it or break it. It's as simple as that. Okay. So, this is just a sample of an exercise that you can do if you're thinking about creating this, matrixed value stream organization. You can get a team of people together and, you know, what do we want from your lean organization? You know, what's the level of importance? Again, you can rank those, and then the columns on the top, you can see there's the current structure, there's different types of matrices, all the way to a value stream organization, and you sort of can score it, you know, 1 is least importance, 5 is the most importance, and, you know, it sort of gives you a general idea. Again, this is a tool just to sort of brainstorm. Doesn't mean that this is exactly what you're going to do, but it's a way to get the people who have to make these decisions to have some say and some input, and give you some direction about, you know, what's the purpose of creating this value stream organization. It's not just another management exercise that, you know, every so many years we reorganize the company. This is something different, and it's done for specific purposes. So that
Nick, can I comment on this? Because
yes,
in a previous role, we gave this idea a lot of thought, and the conclusion was that this particular value stream manager need to be a very competent leader, because he essentially has to pull the whole product from purchasing to delivery through the organization, and that especially in the beginning does ask a lot of this person or this team, because now it's very, again, safe to stay within your department and blame the other one.
yeah,
While a value stream manager doesn't have that luxury. He is responsible for the whole end-to-end process. And we found that it's very hard to find somebody in the organization to be willing to take up this role. So it is a challenge, both organizational, but also on the HR level, to develop your people to be able to do such a role, to perform in such a role.
yes, you made you made a great deal of excellent points there. You know, it's value stream managers don't really, there might be some natural people in the company, but you have to develop them, and that takes time, because they have to, you know, they've sort of grown up in the organization in this functional role, and now you're saying, oh no, now your responsibilities go beyond where you've been working for so many years. So yeah, it's not the easiest thing to do in the world in terms of a lean transformation, but you know, it's a discussion that a company has to have, because, you know, if you sort of say, oh, well, we can't, you know, we can't identify a good value stream manager or managers, then you sort of fall back, well, we'll just keep it the way it is. But that's not going to be effective in the long run. So, you know, these are sort of important discussions that leaders of companies have to have. There also is this, go ahead.
What we chose then in the change period to have a kind of a shadow value stream manager. So we said, okay, you will be acting value stream manager, and you identify the issues, and you have a direct report, or you can directly report to the CEO if you come across something that doesn't work, and then together you will solve that problem within the value stream. So so you don't go within a big bang and let the structure go, but appoint someone who has who feels responsible, because that's where it starts. He needs to feel responsible for the whole process.
Yeah.
And then help him top down to resolve any issues, and then and make the organization change into. Unfortunately, we didn't go through the whole process, but the idea of a shadow value stream manager, that was well adapted.
Oh, yeah, sounds like it worked well, great. Yeah, there's in Toyota, by the way, they use what's called the chief engineer approach. So this is someone in the organization who has sort of the experience to understand how the entire value stream should be working. They don't have any day-to-day operational control, but they're involved in working with specific managers that are lower in the organization to coordinate things.
Yeah.
There's you know, there's no one way to do this that is necessarily better than the other. What's important is what works in your company, and what works best for your company is going to be what works best to help to serve customers better and to optimize the performance of an entire value stream rather than optimize the components of the value stream. That's really the discussion. And even, for example, like in GE, I mean, if you're talking about that FP&A process, which has a lot of different, steps to it, what's the best way to coordinate all that work on a regular basis? Okay, it might be the current structure you have, might be some other type of structure that might work a little bit better. All right, any other questions on the value stream organization?
Yeah, so this particular tool that you have up on the screen, is the thought that this would be like a questionnaire template to take the team through and have them form their own assessment, say for, which of these organizational structures do we feel creates most value for the customer? Is that what's intended to be read?
Yeah, somebody would facilitate the exercise. And, you start with the column on the left. What do we want to achieve? What are our goals? And you got to sort of approach it from a lean thinking point of view. And then you list the different, you could even get them to brainstorm what would be some different structures that we can do. And then you sort of just have them rate it, and, you can accumulate the scores or whatever. You can do it verbally or whatever.
Okay.
All right. So let's move on to manager standard work, which, like I said, is also called leader standard work. This is another one of those managing the value stream issues, which can be a bit difficult, much like about creating a value stream organization. Only because managers are managers because they have been successful at what they do with their particular style of managing. That's how they got where they are. And now this idea of manager standard work, which is really about creating some standard routines and habits that all managers use on a regular basis. For someone who's been in a position, maybe a management position for, 10, 15, 20 years, and you're saying, well, we need to do manager standard work. It's sort of like, what do you mean? Look at everything I've done over my career. Look at how we how successful we are. It's hard for them to get into their heads. We have to do something different. So you're dealing with experience. One thing I learned, and I'll tell you that story later. That's a different story. So what is manager standard work? It's really a system that focuses on using visual management tools, requires timeliness and discipline. This is not something that you do only when you feel like doing it. It is something that you should always do. And it drives action and learning. And it drives learning both for the manager and for the teams that the manager manages, both ways. So think of it as a learning routine. Okay, you know, as I mentioned, managers that get into or that have experience, there, you know, you sort of get some mechanistic thinking, sort of certainty about things. Okay, I've been managing for a long time, and I'm pretty sure I know how to see the indicators and how to react, things like that. But this is a learning process, and it's a learning routine. And so the best way to begin something new when things have to change is with principles. So here are some basic principles around manager standard work. The first one is go see. Go see the actual work in the actual place by the actual people. Another way to say that would be go to the Gemba. So manager standard work does not happen in the manager's office and people coming into the office. It happens the manager going out where they need to be with their teams. It's about learning about process performance, learning about your people, learning about problems and issues. You're not going to learn by sitting in an office and waiting for people to come to you or through, you know, just exchanging emails. You want to do a lot of coaching in terms of developing your people. And you want to gain insight into opportunities for improvement. Now, we're going to talk a lot more about coaching, but, you know, this is really the analogy of what a manager should be to make value stream management sustain itself. Is you have to adopt a coaching mentality, okay, which means part of being a coach is emulating what you want out of your team, thoughts and actions and stuff like that. And I learned this in my first CFO job, and I learned it in a very interesting way. So yeah, so here I am. I'm a CFO. It's my first CFO position. I have a team of accounting people, and we're running the department, we're closing the books and things like that. And at the same time, I'm coaching our son's Little League baseball team. And what I found out by coaching about 9 to 12-year-old boys, what I learned there is I couldn't fool them. Okay, I couldn't fool them, and they were hanging on every word I said. They were hanging on my body language and my reactions and things like that. And when I realized that I can't fool 9 to 12-year-olds, and they're very aware of everything, that I sure can't do it with adults that are that are part of my team. And so that changed my whole view of being a manager, and realized that I need to be more of a coach than a manager. What you want to get out of manager standard work a lot is understand recurring problems. You want to understand if performance is stagnant. What are we doing about it? So what is manager standard work? Sort of the 4 elements. One is, what's the routine? Who, what, and when to check. And every manager needs a level of a routine. I'm going to get to that in a moment. You know, as much as possible, use the visual controls, visual management practices. You have a daily accountability, meaning, you know, what was checked, what was adjusted. And the 4th one is the discipline. Lead by example. If you manager standard work is not something you do when you have time or when you feel like doing it. It is structured. And other things have to be adapted. Other things, the other responsibilities that the manager has to be worked around manager standard work. Let me give you an example. So back about 10 years ago, we did some work putting in lean thinking in a small community hospital. And so we established manager standard work. The problem is they weren't getting it done, or they couldn't get it done because they had so many meetings to attend. And so the president of the hospital had a very simple solution where she created no meeting zones. So certain times of the day, no meetings could be scheduled. That allowed the managers to do their standard work routines during those times of the day. So just let me ask you here, anybody have any form of manager standard work in place?
Better hear Angie's team speak up.
Sorry.
No, the group of us from G, we should all have it. I know we all have it. But I've only had it, you know, like in the last 4 months, let's say.
Oh, okay, good. Well, that's a good start. Got it in place. Anybody else?
Yeah, well, during Corona, we needed to start working with Microsoft Teams, and a really in-depth yeah, this tool, it's only a tool, of course, you need to use it, but this tool gives you a lot of opportunities to manage your own work and also do it across teams. So
Yeah.
what I find very nifty is that you can assign tasks within a team, and then from all those tasks in the different teams, you can get your personalized task list. So and that works very easy. That makes a lot of sense. And there are some really cool things in there. And our engineers, they are really used to that, but working with these tables and how do you call it in Scrum and stuff like that. They organize the daily work really well. And for us as managers, we don't do that as well. But working with a tool like Teams makes a lot of these things possible in an easy way. What I like about those, what you're showing here, is that it's very visual. I mean, with Teams, it's in your computer, and then if you don't open your computer, you don't see it, and this is in the middle of your room, and that's what I like about this. So.
Okay, good.
Luckily,
great.
we also have some very big screens in the office, so you can put it.
The pandemic has had a large impact on going to the Gemba. Anybody else want to add anything right now? So think of manager standard work as a PDCA cycle. Okay, so you develop the cadence or the routine. You conduct your go-sees. You're really you're conducting the go-see to actually do the check and adjust piece. So, if you have good visual controls and good visual performance boards in place, a manager can do the Gemba walk and pretty much get a snapshot of what the status is by looking at the board. As I mentioned when we were talking about daily lean management and daily boards, you want those boards to be a very like a simple storyboard where I can look at it and I can understand it without a lot of human intervention. And then there's the adjust. Work with the team to address the current problems and issues. This is sort of like where you do a little bit of learning, okay? And where the manager can use his or her experience to maybe, help teams, do some PDCA and maybe get to a solution in this, in the Gemba walk. So think of it again as a PDCA cycle. Now, there's different layers of management standard or manager standard work. Okay, and the higher you get in the organization, the less structured it is, but you still want to have some. What's the structure is, what percentage of your manager's time is dedicated to standard work versus other work. What's the specific sequence or the specific time of day? Okay, so I'll give you a story from Boeing. We did a lot of work with them over the years, a few years ago, and I was working at their Long Beach facility near Los Angeles, and they had a really strong manager standard work practice in place where the head of that location knew by 10 o'clock in the morning if there was anything that he had to deal with that started at the daily huddle level meetings and went through maybe like three or four short meetings, but by 10 o'clock in the morning, he knew if he had anything to deal with. And that's just the best example of managers, the layers of manager standard work. And I have a slide coming up in a few minutes that I'll show you, but part of this manager standard work is escalating problems and issues to the right level of the organization so they can be dealt with in a timely manner or in the manner that they need to be dealt with. Another Boeing story. This was a group, a division of Boeing called maintenance engineering. So these engineers, and there were many of them, their job was to address maintenance issues. When one of the airlines called, for example, and said, a luggage tractor hit the landing gear, what do we do? And they had to address it. And then they also created maintenance manuals. So the manager of this group, he started when he was in the office, he started attending the daily huddles of all the teams. Those daily meetings had been established and were running, and there were like, I think about 15 of them a day. But he started attending them, and he told his assistant to carve his schedule out so he could attend them. And he talked about how much he was learning just by attending the meetings and listening. So managers, I give you these examples because manager standard work is very, very effective. But it's a different style of management. You want manager standard work to be visible Okay, the discipline, what is the routine? Okay, now, sometimes that you can create these checklists. What am I looking at? What do I do? When? Okay, how do I take notes? How do I document what I'm seeing? So this is just one example. This is another example. This actually is from that Boeing maintenance engineering team. So you can see, value stream managers had certain levels of standard work, and then cell leaders had different levels of standardized work. And you can see the variation there. I mentioned the tiered meetings. Okay. How do the leaders, the different levels of leaders or management levels in the company, how do they communicate these issues that are at these, when you have manager standard work? It needs to be something besides email. Okay. And the best way to do it is to have like a series of tiered meetings where you start at the daily level, the daily huddle, and then you have short meetings where you're just escalating issues. It's more like just what do we need to know? And some days there may not be anything that you need to know. So what do you think about manager standard work?
One question I get, Nick, is where in the organization do you start? Is this something that the leaders start and they start doing it from the top down, or do you start it with your frontline leaders, at the huddles and tier it up?
Start at the lowest level possible and then build from there. So, you establish daily huddles and you have some leader who learns at the daily huddle. What do we need above that? What does the leader do? This is a lot of it is, problems and issues that need to be escalated. Okay, so how do we escalate it? It depends, when it depends on the structure, the organizational structure, and how many, the span of control. I mean, if one leader is talking to one manager, how do we do it? But I call it the escalation process, but start low, work your way up.
Yeah, we had a pretty mature process of the tiered meetings in a couple of our businesses. But I'm not sure that the true leader standard work was there, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing about the tiered meetings is, and I've seen them in other places where they're more like just information exchanges.
Right.
And, it's sort of like, well, here's how we did yesterday with on-time delivery. Okay, that's fine. I always say manager standard work is what is the essential information that needs to be known in order, because some action needs to be taken. But if you're just saying, hey, on-time delivery was 98% yesterday, okay, great, that's fine. I don't need to know that. I need to know what the problems and issues are, because the job of managers is to help solve problems or give guidance to teams to solve problems or to remove roadblocks. So for example, if a problem rises to my level and I'm a manager, that means the team below me, the team or teams below me could not solve that problem. They probably need me to do something, maybe get some subject matter expert in to help them solve that problem. Or maybe I need to come in and lend my experience to help solve the problem. But so it's it's a totally different way to think about managing, I think, and that's why it sometimes is hard for people to, because again, they have established patterns. Another good, effective way to build it, let me just go back a couple slides. So let's say you have daily huddles in place and they're running pretty well. Well, invite the next level of managers to attend daily huddles, just to observe, just to learn what is being talked about there. And most of the time, when you do that with managers, they're amazed at what goes on that they don't know. And then that might spur them on to like, okay, we need something like this. Anybody else have any discussion on, want to have any discussion on manager standard work? Okay, so let's talk about coaching. Transition from managing to coaching, which, like I said, is really falls under the standard work umbrella. So you have traditional management, directing people, how to address and fix problems, and you got this superior subordinate relationships. There's level of certainty from management, and a manager is also very confident in their abilities. When you look at sort of lean coaching, it's all about developing people to become skilled problem solvers using PDCA. It's about asking open-ended questions rather than telling people what to do. It's about being in the Gemba, being where the work is being done. It's about having a learning mindset. Okay, I might be a manager, I might have a whole lot of experience, but I don't know everything because I'm not involved in the day-to-day operations. Even if a long time ago, maybe I worked in the process, I don't know what's going on. And most of all, I think it's about humility, meaning I don't know everything, and I'm not going to act like I do. And so, I'm not going to. So this is a really big transition, and it requires some special practices, which we're going to talk about. Anyway, where are you on this continuum? Not you particularly, but you more in the traditional management, you more in the lean coaches, or somewhere in between?
We are definitely in the more traditional management. There's a few activities that we do that kind of lend themselves to being a lean coach, but by and large, we're more of the traditional management model.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, what I notice is that when the stress is not that high, it's easier to maintain a more coaching relationship. But when the deadlines come near, and the default is to become directive again.
Yeah, and it's hard to break habits. I mean, there's an element, again, this is not black or white, one way or the other, but at times it's important to be directive, because that's really what an experienced manager sometimes has to make some really tough decisions on short notice. So again, it's the traditional approach is this urgency to fix whatever is ailing versus the lean coach approach, which is trying to improve. And this is one thing that's interesting, when you sort of take the coaching viewpoint, is that, if you're a manager and if you know the answer and you know what needs to be done, simply don't tell people what to do, but, use open-ended questions to guide the people along so that they figure it out themselves. And it takes a little bit of patience, and it takes managers just being very disciplined in how they do that. All right, so, what do we do here? So here's a book that I read and greatly influenced me. It's called the Toyota. There's the Toyota Kata book, and that's a really good book. But the book I really like is what's called the Toyota Kata Practice Guide, and these are routines that can be used, that are used sort of in coaching. So I'm going to review these in at a very high level. So think about coaching as it's the PDCA process. Okay, really, that's what you're trying to do as a coach. What's the issue? What's the problem? What's the plan to execute? And then how do we study and confirm results? And this is a thinking process. And it's also how lean coaches want to talk. I call this changing the conversation. So you take the coaching practices and improvement routines, and that really sustains continuous improvement. So what is the coaching routine? It's basically these 5 questions. And this is a way that you as a lean coach think, and it's really how you lead the conversation. And you can apply, this is a form of PDCA. You can apply this to almost any discussion when you're talking about what's going on in any part of the business. What's the target condition? So if I'm talking to you as a coach, I'm asking you that because what do we expect to happen? Okay, now what's the current condition? What's the current state? Okay, what actually happened? What are the problems and issues that are preventing a process or whatever from meeting the target condition? So what do we have to do to find that information out? Do we have to observe? Maybe we're talking about a few problems. We have to talk about one problem. We want to avoid paralysis. I see Michael circled that.
Yeah, what does that mean, Nick?
Avoid Pareto analysis.
Paralysis, Pareto
Paralysis.
paralysis.
Where you're just analyzing and you're not taking action.
Okay, gotcha.
It should be, analysis paralysis. We're going to analyze, but we're not going to do anything. So you really need to create these fast cycles. Okay. And then, when a coach has helped others identify what the obstacle is, okay, what's the next step? What are we going to do? And then the 5th thing is, okay, when can we go see what we have learned after we take the next step? So the coach is instructing either one person or a team of people. Not instructing, but you're taking them through these questions to get them to think and also to sort out a lot in their heads, because there's a tendency for people to accumulate small problems and create one big problem that appears to be unsurmountable. And what you want to do is you want to get people to break down big problems into small problems and just solve smaller problems over time. And so this is a routine. This is a way to discuss when a manager is doing their standard work and going to the Gemba and talking to people, especially if you're looking at a performance board and maybe you see something isn't performing, the process isn't performing the way it should. So, instead of saying, hey, what's wrong? You take them through this process. So here are some coaching practices. Frequency. How often do you coach? Do it on a daily or regular schedule. That's like part of your standard work. Or maybe if it's a smaller function, or the way you're managing improvement, maybe you're having daily one-on-one sessions. You don't do it irregularly or when we have time. Okay, this is part of your work. Okay, this is in your job description. The structure, follow the 5 coaching questions and don't have it be unstructured and meandering. Location, in the Gemba, not in your office. Insight. As a coach, what you're trying to do is evaluate the threshold of knowledge of the people you are coaching. Okay, you're not trying to give them your preconceived solutions. You want them to figure it out for themselves. So, again, the best analogy that I come up with is, whether like a coach that coaches a team or coaches some individual, like, in an individual sport, or you can even, look at it as like a music teacher. So someone who is coaching and helping, you're trying to help an individual and or a team of people to develop certain skills and get better at it. And you're evaluating how well they are doing. What is this? This is really around a lot of what we've been talking about in the course in terms of problem solving. And the more that this becomes a habit as part of manager standard work, the more that coaching is involved in this, the more it is going to change how people view what their manager is doing. I mean, just if you follow any sports, you can think about, certain teams which they don't perform, they have a losing record, they're not very good. Then they bring in a different coach, and that coach puts in their system and they get better. And they have sustained success over time. That's really what we're talking about here, is having a system. I mean, and putting that system in place using coaching practices. This also really focuses on very much on respect for people. Okay. Just by coaching, you're going to help develop people over time. Then when you think about people, you're trying to get them to focus on improvement, and the improvement routine is very similar to PDC. It's another form of PDCA. What's their direction, or what's the challenge based on the goals? Okay, what's the problem? do they understand the current state? Have they studied the process? What's the next target condition? And then how are they going to experiment to the target condition? So what you're doing as a coach, and by asking those questions, is you're getting people, or the people that you are coaching, you're getting them to think this way here. The coaching questions lead to this. Everybody sort of understand how these two things work together? So the coaching cycle, improvement routines, that drives sustained improvement. A little bit more about people development. Okay. You want all employees to participate in continuous improvement as a regular part of their work. You have to have a plan to get them involved, whether it's in daily huddles, whether it's sort of, cross-functional based improvement, participation in Kaizen events. What I've seen happen when companies really get formal Kaizen events going is there's this tendency for who's ever organizing the Kaizen event to pick the stars from previous events, the ones that really know how to get stuff done, as opposed to bringing new people on board, because all they want to do is get the Kaizen event done. But you got to use Kaizen events as a way to train and educate people on improvement. Focus on developing people, whether it's something like a skills matrix, cross-training, or how to become lean leaders. Measure morale and use PDCA to understand when you have a morale issue. And we're not talking about employee surveys. We're talking about, have a daily measurement of morale in daily huddles. How do you feel today? And if they don't feel good, why? Then there's the waste of overburden. Okay, overburdening your people continuously with more work than they can handle is a form of waste. You wouldn't think of overworking a machine because machines break down. Well, people break down too if you overwork them. Any questions before I move on to decision making? Just have a few slides here, and then we'll wrap things up. So a lot of what I've been talking about in terms of manager standard work and the coaching cycle, improvement kata, can be applied in decision making. All right. So let me ask you something. When it comes to decision making, is it basically done like rank in the room or rank in the organization, or is it team-based? Is the process that you go through to make decisions, is there jumping to conclusions, or is there following some level of standardized work to understand all the issues involved? Assumptions. Is there a sort of static linear cause and effect? Okay, we've been down this road before and we're pretty certain we know how to make this decision. Or do you accept that, maybe the relationships are a bit more dynamic and nonlinear and we need to sort of study a little bit longer? Is the focus strictly financial or more lean thinking approach, we're trying to create economic value in the company. So how would you rate your decision-making practices? And I know a lot of decisions are made in an organization, and especially even a small one. So just what you're familiar with. Any comments?
Yeah, well, what you see is that, yeah, a lot of decision making is being done traditionally. But even if as management you say, okay, we want to make it less traditional, then that is also a process, because then the team members also need to come up with the ideas and the thought processes.
Yeah.
And that's where what we are currently dealing with. That, okay, what do you think? And then you people, yeah, but you have to set the guidelines or the process, or
Yeah.
but what do you think? That it is not only a decision we want to become more lean and less traditional. You also need to develop as a team and your team to be able to do that. That's my take on this.
Yeah, good.
It's not just a decision to do it. It's more than that.
Yeah, it's a process.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to add anything? Okay, so what's important to understand, and again, we talked a lot about decisions in previous sessions, but a lean transformation changes the information that decision makers value. Okay, and there's sort of layers of value here. From the user viewpoint, in a lean organization, the information needs to be understandable in the context of lean thinking and the economics of lean. When it comes to a decision, it needs to be useful, which means the information needs to be relevant and reliable for that particular decision. So if you think about lean thinking as serving customers better, that the suppliers of the information to decision makers, now a lot of times that's accounting and finance, but in other parts of the company, it may not be accounting and finance, is that we want to serve customers better, who are the decision makers, with the quality information that and where the customer is defining the quality. So we need to understand that. And there are, there's a lot of changes which may have to occur in the information. So a critical look has to be taken care, has to be done in terms of analysis and decision making. And again, you can apply the PDCA cycle in order to avoid cutting corners and jumping to solutions. You sort of use PDCA. So what's the purpose of this analysis or this decision we have to make? What's the relevant and reliable information? And what outcomes do we expect? We talked about those 6 possible outcomes last session. You create a plan. How are we going to get from the future? How are we getting from the current state to the future state? We execute the plan. And then what are we going to use to measure the impact of the action plan? We can use box scores. We can use any target that we created in the plan. Then we determine next steps. If you follow this process, again, you're going to avoid things like rank in the room and cutting corners and maybe not considering everything. You can also follow sort of the coaching routine, okay, in terms of decision making. So again, maybe there needs to be some coaching involved in what what do we need? So again, these are the 5 coaching cycle questions just applied to analysis and decision making. We also want to make the decision making process visible. Okay, you got to get the right people on it together to make the decision. You want it to be team-based. You want to make the numbers visible. And that makes the discussion, the way people are thinking, visible. Because a lot of times, I don't know if you've sat in a meeting where some kind of analysis is being done or being proposed, and people sort of just, they have their own little mental models in their head, and they're spouting out numbers, or they're saying this or that or this, and nobody understands what's going on. You know, I don't understand what's going on in your head. You don't understand what's going on in my head. So let's make it all visible. What we're trying to do is make sure that this cycle of like learning through analysis and decision making, that we're focusing the thinking on that the numbers drive lean thinking or support lean thinking, that the behaviors are about serving customers better, eliminating waste, and our decisions are aligned with lean practices and the lean strategy. The other aspect, which we've talked about a little bit, is, you know, the recognizing that lean continuous improvement creates a lot of capacity. And what are we going to do with that capacity to create value? So just to wrap things up on the decision making, I know we didn't get into many details, but if you follow PDCA, if you have standardized work, if necessary, have coaches guiding a team on decision making so that everything becomes consistent in the way it's being performed. Any questions on that? Okay, so let's wrap this course up. I showed you this slide way back when, at the beginning of session 1. So value stream management is this holistic integrated system. It's lean practices. It's numbers, it's new numbers in terms of performance measurements and financial information, capacity information. It's like the numbers that when we just talk strictly about lean accounting, it's about integrating those numbers and those practices into coordinated routines where we're controlling, improving, planning, and managing. And what we want to do, again, you know, putting in sort of creating a new system or modifying an existing system, doesn't matter what you're talking about, you know, it's a hard lift in business because, like I mentioned earlier today, you have to run the business while you're trying to change the business, or you have to run the process and get work done while you're trying to change. So it requires sort of breaking it down into simple tasks and routines. And the best way to do that, I found, is to follow the PDCA approach. And you've seen all these slides again, I'm sort of just summarizing them. But for daily lean management, you know, you want to create this routine with all the tools. And what you're trying to do is create, effective teams that are self-directed, that are learning about how their process performs. And like I mentioned before, daily lean management is like going to school every day. Every single day, you're going to go and learn something. And if you approach it that way, it's usually effective. And then you think about sort of improvement. That's what when we talked about value stream operational improvement. What are the improvement targets for the value stream or the process? How often do we need to review to make operational adjustments? What numbers are we going to use to check, such as the value stream box score? And how are we going to adjust improvements on an ongoing basis? So that's more like a weekly cycle. Now for, this, and for something like accounting and finance, you may not have, you'll have daily lean management in place. You may not have formal value stream operational management in place, but it's sort of like you want to look just at the improvements. And how often do we need to just focus on improvement, not how did we do yesterday in terms of the daily lean management? Or there's some ways you can incorporate both. For example, once a week, your daily lean management would be, let's just focus on the improvement. Sorry. We talked about having an integrated lean performance measurement system. So the idea here, whatever part of the organization you're in, what are the 5 to 7 lean performance measurements that are relevant and reliable for the particular process that is being measured and for the particular time frame that's being measured? Again, we talked about the linkage chart and building these measures in a cross-functional format, piloting the measures in the way they're intended to be used to determine are they effective measures, and then making the necessary adjustments. Typically with lean performance measurements, maybe it doesn't take long to figure out if a measure is effective or not. Like I have the time frames there, and then you adjust, and then you basically continue to use the same measures. It's not like every year we're going to create a lot of new measures. We talked about structuring continuous improvement, different levels of improvement based on certain criteria. And I talked about these 3 a couple sessions ago. But the real key here is that you want your improvement activities to be disciplined. You want them to be an effective use of time, because you're asking people to take time out, or you're taking people away from their normal work activities to improve. And so you want to make the most effective use of that time. So have it structured so that people understand. We talked about the annual deployment process. Sorry, got a little too far ahead. We talked about policy deployment and how to do an annual plan where there's consensus and agreement through catchball to finalize action plans for the year. And this is not a wish list of what the actions, what we hope to get done. This is what we are planning to get done at the different levels of the organization in terms of improvements. And they're all linked back to the strategy. The idea here in policy deployment, what are in any given year, what are the 3 to 5 specific actions that we want this organization to achieve? And policy deployment doesn't end with the annual planning. You also do a monthly review, which is a PDCA process in itself, to make sure that the tactics to achieve the goals don't need to be adjusted. And then finally, what we talked about today, creating a value stream organization, using manager standard work, transitioning from managing to coaching, and using lean decision-making practices, putting these management practices in place really helps sustain all of the tools and other tools and practices that we've been talking about. You need them both to be effective, for value stream management to be effective. So if you think about, what's the benefit? What are the benefits of value stream management to any company? Deployment of the strategy, aligning the organization, and also allocating resources to ensure success of both. Overall, serving customers better. From an operations standpoint, there's supporting daily operations, developing people in a great work environment, enabling continuous improvement cycles and providing rapid feedback on their effectiveness, and creating a framework for manager standard work. That sort of wraps things up. Here's resources. If you're interested, you may have been there already, but visit the website, read the books. And by the way, if you happen to read any of the books, especially the new book, Practicing Lean Accounting, please write a review on Amazon if you're so inclined. All righty. Any closing thoughts? I thoroughly enjoyed this. You were a very good group of people to have. You made it easy to do. So what do you think? Was this beneficial for you in the overall?
Definitely, Nick. I wanted to say that there was so much of good information on the slides that you were sharing. Especially, I loved the ones on decision making and leader standard work. So I was also quiet because I know I have some time with you later today. But just wanted to let you know that this has been fantastic and so relevant for some of the processes that we're trying to improve. Set up daily management. So thank you very much. And we are reading the book. So we'll come back with more questions.
That's the most important thing. That's good. You don't know this yet, but that's part of Mike's coaching cycles. He's going to make sure that you're making progress on the book.
Yeah, we've got a book club set up.
Frederic is a little bit late. He's just entering. Anybody else want to, any closing comments? If you have any ideas on how I can make this course better, share them with me. Okay. And there's that offer of a final one-on-one session to talk about some of these things we talked about today. And as I say, there's no expiration date on that.
You might regret that offer.
Anybody else have any thoughts? All right, we're at the top of the hour. Thanks for attending. I'm going to run this course again probably early next year in the first quarter. So if you know anybody else that may be interested in it, tell them to take a look at it next time it's offered. Okay. All right. You guys have a good day, good evening. Talk to you soon.
Thanks,
Thank
Nick.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.